My name is Phil Johnston, and I am a creative writer and content creator at Hasbro. The long story is that Hasbro has an internal agency, like an internal ad agency within the walls of Hasbro. And I work at that agency. And basically for brands like Transformers, Star Wars, Baby Alive, Marvel sometimes, I get to make toy commercials. I get to make YouTube content and shorts, animated shorts, and all kind of fun stuff.
What's like a larger overview of what type of things Hasbro does? Obviously, you are in that creative aspect of it, but kind of the larger picture there.
Yeah. So the way Hasbro likes to describe it, Hasbro is a play and entertainment company because I think old school would be a toy company. They make toys and they have a ton of licensed brands. They have a ton of their own brands. Nerf and again Transformers, Star Wars, Marvel, Disney princesses, Baby Alive, and some of these huge brands. So they make toys for those brands. But what they've done in the past few years is kind of reinvent themselves so that they're not only making toys, but also making some entertainment. They just kind of bought a company called E1 that has the license for things like PJ Masks and Peppa Pig. So they get to make all this great content from either YouTube content, Netflix content. So it's play and entertainment these days, and I get to be a part of it.
Great, thank you. And what are some of the kind of important skills for employees in your kind of role and then also within the organization, both, their career and education, their hard skills, but also the softer skills?
So in terms of my specific group, because I'm on the creative team in the agency, everybody's really creative. So I'm one of two writers at the agency, kind of doing some creative writing, some early concepting. But also I work always in partnership with an art director so that you get, not only the writing and the concepting of the ideas, but the visuals as well. And so we'll work together really from a concept on a commercial. Like brands will come to us, you say, we need a toy commercial for Transformers. And so I'll work with my art directors to come up with what the story is, what are the features that we're going to call out, what are we going to show, is it going to have kids in it that are playing with the toys? Are we going to show a lot of action-packed scenes and things like that. And so I'll work with my art directors to kind of concept what that commercial is going to look like. What's it going to feel like when you see it on YouTube or when you see it on television? And so we work together to sell in those concepts to the brands. We pitch the work. When they decide they want to do it, we're on set while we're shooting it. So you need a lot of interpersonal skills. You have to be sort of multidisciplined. But also kind of teamwork. I know it sounds sort of basic, but you need teamwork because the way that I'm creative, I get to work with a ton of people who are creative in different ways and kind of share space with them, share ideas with them. And it really comes together as a result of the effort of a bunch of creative people. So not only, do you have to be creative, but also trust other people's creativity. There are some people who are creative in different ways, like producers who are working on budgets and things like that. And you have to be able to work with those people. So just really fluid, you got to be able to work with a bunch of different disciplines.
Great, thank you. And as best you can answer this, because 2020 has been quite the year. What's the outlook for entry-level roles, both kind of in Hasbro and in that creative field?
Yeah. So I think, again, due to COVID, it's been really, really tough in terms of like entry-level positions. But I do think we're starting to see sort of a rebound on the company side, particularly in the job that I do, creative marketing and creative content making. I mean, people are home, they're watching Netflix, they're watching streaming services, they're watching YouTube content. And the fact that, I get to make that stuff or, my team gets to make that stuff. You feel really lucky, during a pandemic. But there are some entry-level positions that are starting to open up just because content doesn't stop moving. Luckily, I feel really bad for anybody who's out there struggling and doesn't have a job. But there are some things starting to open up, especially with what I do. A lot of temp positions. Things are definitely starting to open back up. So I think the outlook is only looking better as we move forward. Because again, the demand for content is so high right now that anybody working in the marketing or content business, I feel like now's the time to kind of get in.
And then in terms of your kind of own career journey, what were the early experiences that had an impact on your career, you know, entry-level jobs, internships, that sort of thing?
Yep. I actually started in an entry-level position that was, I was doing something that had nothing to do with creativity. And I knew, you know, I came from a creative writing background. When I was at CCRI, when I was a student at CCRI, actually, I studied psychology. I studied English and creative writing. I studied a ton of different things, just trying to find my footing. And once I found creative writing, I feel like I really started to pick up steam, you know, onto four-year university at Rick. And then, you know, I really wanted to get right into the field and start doing things that were creative and kind of putting that degree to use. Didn't really work out like that. You know, it's tough to find creative jobs. But what I did, I didn't give up. I knew Hasbro was sort of this huge company that was local. I knew, you know, I was a fan of the brands that they had. I was a fan of Transformers and Star Wars and things like that. I grew up collecting toys, and I always loved that, you know, that sort of thing in that industry, that space. I watched content on YouTube. So what I actually did was accepted an entry-level temp position as a project coordinator. And I love, you know, shout out to my project coordinator team. I love that team. You know, they really made me feel like I was at home, even though they knew I was a creative who wanted to do other things. But it ended up really working out because, you know, within the walls of Hasbro, project coordinators, really, you're in a meeting where you are seeing the project go from conception to when it hits the shelves, and you're getting to meet everybody. So, you know, I think one of the really good things that I did was take that job, you know, kind of, even though it wasn't really creative, I took a risk, I put myself out there, and I took that temp position because what it did was allowed me a seat at the table with everybody who was making decisions on projects. And so that, you know, that went for about a year. I took that entry-level position, went for about a year. I made a lot of friends, but one of the most important things that I did was I got an opportunity to network. And I met the people who were actually in the advertising agency, in the studio making content. I got to meet them and build some relationships. And ultimately, it didn't work out at the end of that contract. My contract ended and I left. But right then and there, I decided that I didn't want to do anything if it wasn't creative. But by then, I had already had my foot in the door. I had already met so many people. So I, you know, again, I never turned my nose up at an entry-level job. I started in an entry-level position that had nothing to do with what I'm doing now, but it opened up those lanes for me, and I got to meet those people who were making decisions. And so they remembered me. You know, I went away and I got a job at a small sort of mom and pop advertising agency, and that was really nice. I was the only writer there, so I got to write, and it was almost like a crash course in marketing because I hadn't done that. And then I was only there for about 10 months when Hasbro called back. You know, they remembered me from that entry-level position, from my interest. And, you know, I had a friend of mine and somebody who's still one of my mentors today said, hey, I think you should apply for this job. I really do. You know, people know you. I think you should apply for this job. This is what you wanted to do originally. And that opened up, you know. So it didn't happen right away, but getting that entry-level position was essential to me ending up in the creative field that I'm in now. So I took the call. You know, I had the meeting and ended up ultimately getting the job. And I've been there 3 years now at Hasbro, 3 years and 5 months doing what I love doing, you know.
That's awesome. Congratulations. And my last question, what advice would you have for current CCRI students that do want to get into those creative fields or you work at Hasbro after they graduate from CCRI?
So I think two points of advice. One, you know, going back to what I was just saying, don't be afraid to take an entry-level position, even if it has nothing to do with, you know, what your passions are or, you know, what you think you should be doing in the field, just because you never know what kind of lanes are opening up. You know, again, when I was a project coordinator, I went to go get a coffee at a Starbucks kiosk at Hasbro and met someone who ultimately was going to hire me. And just being in that space and putting myself in that place is what ultimately opened things up for me as a creative. You know, it didn't happen overnight, but it was just, you know, put yourself in those spaces to, you know, to be seen and to get those opportunities. And it could eventually lead you to do what you want to do. And then the second piece of advice that I would offer up to any CCRI student is to really be adaptable. Study and be adaptable. One of the things I learned, you know, from my time at CCRI, spending time in the computer labs. I had a student job at the computer lab. Spending some time there was studying things like creative director. You know, I didn't know what the title meant at the time when I was at CCRI. So I studied, you know, I spent a lot of time just, trying to see what positions were out there. Spend some time on LinkedIn and just study people. If there are companies that you really look up to, like a Hasbro or like, some cool brands and some cool creative companies, see what the job titles are, kind of study people's LinkedIns and, see what lanes are available to you. Because once you have that, it'll give you something to target and give you really something to strive for. And then, the second piece of that is just to be adaptable. I think, COVID has taught us all a lot. The pandemic has taught us all a lot about whether working from home or being adaptable. And I think that, what we're going to start to see is a lot more hybrid roles. You might think of yourself as one thing, you might think of yourself as a creative, but there might be a role for you that you can carve out for yourself, because I think companies are, a lot more open to that now. Even places like Hasbro, something like a content creator, quote unquote, like, that position didn't really exist before, but we're seeing a lot more of that because people, have a lot of disciplines, they have a lot of passions, have a lot of interests. So, don't be afraid to just make your own job, carve out your own space and walk in confident, and I think that'll allow you to go far.